Happy Thursday, everybody. It's nice and cold out today. It's like, I don't know, 11 degrees, so no big deal. But, anyways, we're going to warm up with some education, as cheesy as that may sound. And what we're going to educate today is I'm going to share a little bit of a document that I made that helps us to understand the transaction flow. And if you're buying a home, what happens after your offer becomes accepted. So, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and kind of take you through. And this is on our website as well, as a heads up. Boom, here we go. Okay, so what we got going on here is, well, what happens after my offer is accepted as a buyer, essentially? And I actually loaded this up if you wanted to download this PDF right here that you see below, right from our site. You can easily do that if you want to take it for reference, so feel free. So this chart that I have going on here, basically what we see here is accepted offer. And I know this is a little bit small, so it might be helpful to download that if you're interested in further kind of looking at this a little more closely. But there's a lot of stuff happening right after that offer gets accepted, right? So as a buyer, you're like, okay, I got my offer accepted. Hooray. Okay, wow, what do I do now? Now what? And that's where a great real estate agent is going to come in and help guide you through the process. And whether it's somebody from our company or another agent, there are lots of good agents out there. And I would definitely make sure that I'm interviewing many agents as a buyer if I'm not feeling like I've got, an agent that actually is worried or cares about my best interest. So anyways, further on forward beyond that, going back to our accepted offer process. So after it's accepted, if in the contract we specified that we're going to do inspections, that's one thing that kind of starts going into play. And some of these numbers are older because I created this a little bit, quite a couple years ago. And so the inflation and everything has come up. So you'll have to bear with some of these figures being a little bit lower than they may be today. But the process is still the same. So you could do a whole house inspection. You can do a radon inspection. You can do a pest inspection. If the home is on a well or a septic, you will actually be required to do an inspection if you're the seller for that. And that's associated with the groundwater hazard. And that's basically like a DNR thing that is just saying, hey, we need to know what's going on in the ground during your ownership or whatever. So it's kind of a side tangent on that. But basically, we do these inspections, right? And there's some other inspections that you could do as well, like Orangeburg. But for simplicity's sake, these are kind of the main ones that you see out there. And we can see that basically whatever we find in here as a buyer, we're going to then, round up what we feel about it. What does this mean? And a lot of that depends on how good of a deal you got. Maybe you'll let some things go. If you paid a ton of money for your home up front or you gave full asking, you're probably going to be more likely to want to have more items fixed by a seller. So you figure out what's going on and then you negotiate the findings. And then we say, okay, cool. We've come to terms with this as a buyer and a seller after we go back through our negotiation to figure out what the seller is willing to fix. And then we can release that contingency from our contract, which simply means that we wrote the contract contingent upon our inspection findings. And if we couldn't come to an agreement here in any way, then we would be able to back out of the contract, which is wonderful for a buyer. So then basically this is just kind of the timeline that's showing us what's happening is the main vein here and how all these other things basically are attaching to this timeline. So then let's say we're doing a loan, which most people do. You find all of the required income verification documents that your lender is going to require you to sign the note. And then you're going to meet with your lender to give them permission essentially to start the process of the lending. And that lender is going to fire up the appraisal and get that moving to find out if the home that you're going to buy is actually worth what you agreed. And this is a great thing because it can protect you as a buyer. If you were going to pay more for the house than what it's actually worth, this is where you get to figure out what that really looks like. And this will help protect the bank primarily, but also you as a buyer. And then we go through this process. Let's say the appraisal is great. Then we come over and we release that appraisal contingency. The lender's sending all of that file to their underwriting department. And that underwriting department's just verifying all of these documents that you gave them, as well as the appraisal. And then they come to a place where they're like, okay, we're approved. We got everything we need. We're good. We can finance this. And then we release this financing contingency. The escrow and closing company down here, they're doing a number of different things in tandem with other small companies as well. So an abstract has to be updated, which is a legal document that actually, I believe only Hawaii and Iowa use still. The rest of the states use something called title insurance. But in this case, the abstract must be updated, and then a title opinion as well. There's a deed preparation. We have ordering, this is for the seller primarily, but ordering a payoff if you're a seller, and that's where they're trying to get the exact number that it's going to be that they need to pay and satisfy the note that they currently have as a seller on the home. So when they sell that, all the numbers balance. Then we have paying the taxes, as well as basically compiling all of the closing documents. They're going to send the deed to the recorder if the lender doesn't also. And essentially, they're kind of just a liaison between the attorney, the abstract or lender, and the agents in this situation. And basically being another accountable party to balance the transaction from a numeric perspective. Then, let's say we get all that done. We get all of our numbers looking good. Then we make sure that what the lender has is the same as what these guys have here, is the double check. And then we can say, okay, good, we're all good. So then we can essentially, with the exception of just making sure that our insurance is all good and we have a policy on that, we can get to closing, but not before we do our final walkthrough. And see, this final walkthrough actually is basically us going in and making sure that the house is still in the same condition that it was when we saw it. So for instance, when somebody moves out, they didn't bang up the wall, or there wasn't, a rug hiding some huge thing, as well as to also ensure that the inspection findings that were negotiated, if there were inspection findings and inspections, that those things are actually done as agreed. And then we can say, cool, we're good. We've done our little checklist and everything looks good. And then we close our deal. And that's where you meet with the lender and as the buyer, and you sign all your loan documents, and the selling agent comes in with the seller side documents, and they give you the keys and garage door openers and anything else that was actually agreed to. You close the loan and you're like, oh my God, I bought a house. And then you move in and the fun begins. So this is kind of a nice little flow. I know, like, for me, I'm a very visual person and I like to write language, obviously, as well. But I like to do both. And so this was a way for me to personally kind of draw this out, to map it, to understand a little bit better about, what does this really look like that's happening? Because when I first got into this industry, and I still haven't ever had anybody show me anything like this. So I had to create it myself. And I'm really glad I did, because it's helped out so many people understand what's going on. So in summation too, I've kind of elaborated a little bit down here if a person wanted to, read a little bit more about that. But other than that, hey, if you're a buyer, this is a great resource to just glance at and be like, okay, here's what's actually happening. So on that note, I hope that this has proved to be somewhat beneficial to you, and that you maybe gain some insight beyond what maybe you knew before. And that's what it's all about. I'm just trying to make sure that we understand and that we're learning how to move forward knowledgeably. And yeah, so that's really it. Have an awesome day. And I hope that, again, everybody got something out of this. So have a wonderful day. And I appreciate your viewership, if that's what you would call it. And if you have any other questions, you can always feel free to check us out at revolutionrealty.team, or you can call 319-849-5252, or you can just look us up online, or you can email me at rob@rr-team.com. team.com. All right. Thanks so much and stay warm out there.